Well, trust you all had a good break, and welcome back to the CS Week EVCx Forum. My name is Dave McKendry. I'm Senior Fellow with the Canadian Electricity Association. And so far, we've heard some excellent presentations in terms of the leadership that's happening in New York City from John Shipman of Con Ed, and we've heard from Franz Lepron of Hydro-Quebec. Wonderful to hear from them. Just wanted to give a quick shout out as well to our sponsor, ABB. This event could not have been possible without ABB's support, and we look forward to hearing from Dan O'Shea of ABB during tomorrow's session. We're now going to move on to our next presenter, Karl Popham of Austin Energy. So, Karl, if you wouldn't mind just turning on your screen, good to see you in the sunny south. Austin Energy serves 500,000 customers in the city of Austin, Texas. Karl is Austin Energy's EV and Emerging Technology Manager. Karl, welcome to the EVCx Forum, and I'll turn the proceedings over to you.
Pleasure to be here, and thank you. Really enjoyed the content so far. During my presentation, formal stuff up front, I'm going to move through very quickly, frankly. Part of that is I thought the Q&A has been really good, so I kind of want to get to that, frankly. But with that said, I will kind of set some context about what may be a little bit different here in Texas and what's going on here at Austin Energy. One, just a shout out, let me make sure. There we go. Quick shout out to the team that just makes all the programs I'm talking about possible. It's a small team, but very high impact, very enthusiastic. I think you can get a lot done as a utility. I'm going to talk about, cherry pick a few of those programs to share with you today, and then looking forward to the Q&A. One thing is, projections, and typically, any projection I see, the only thing I know about all projections is they're all going to be wrong. But what we do know is we continue to see a shift every time analysts have to update the projections. They do faster and more quicker. But part of the question is, well, what about the impact of the pandemic? My thought on that is the fundamentals haven't changed in this growth. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm still very bullish in a continued growth market. We'll see a hiccup, but in some ways, now is the time to really reflect on change, and electric vehicles, transportation is change. And in some ways, over time, we might even see more of an overall increase or acceleration. Also, one thing to kind of consider is when you look at the EV space, it's a global market. So United States is just kind of one sliver there. You really have to know what Germany and China are doing. And once again, those basic underlying premises of government policy, customer experience, different goals, where production is, those haven't changed. If anything, we're continuing to see those increased. EVs isn't new for us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of projections locally and the opportunity. Basically, every EV that comes into the Austin Energy territory, on average, is worth about $385 a year in new utility revenue, whether they plug in at home or public. Vast majority is at home. So as we see, so that's basically by 2023, it's a $20 million business. And if you look at least the ERCOT projections and Austin maintaining its share of the Texas market, we're talking well over $200 million a year in new revenue to the utility. Also, it's not only new revenue, it's the charging profile is different than traditional load we serve here, which is air conditioning load. So not only is new revenue, it's new revenue that's leveraging high cost of existing infrastructure, but at different non-peak times, which really is in a lot of ways just hitting the bottom line much more quickly than just typical building growth or new communities. But even more, what I look at locally is less about, the big global or national trends. I'm really excited about when a new vehicle comes to market and what a single vehicle can do to our market. So in green, you see here what the Tesla 3 really exploded the Austin Energy market, shown here in green, from running around about 100 units per month to overnight 300 units on up per night. And so we're very excited about trucks and SUVs. We did see the Rivian pictured here get delayed about a year, and I think that's okay and pretty smart with them. But we're seeing other announcements from others. They're still rolling out with their plans as business as usual. And that's always been a big limiting factor on growth, especially in the Texas market, is trucks and SUVs, and those are continuing to move forward. And per my previous comment, it's really about charging at home, leveraging that existing infrastructure, but we will start talk about public charging as well. And so it's just not about consumer adoption. There is real opportunities in local fleets, transit authorities, interstate truck travel. We have different projects in different stages in really all these business areas. So all the projections and revenue models I talked to previously was just one customer segment, just residential adoption of just switching to an EV, but there's a lot of other business opportunities for utilities. One thing we did is, so we have 38 initiatives, so we can really pride or doing just about anything a utility can do. It's a very mature program, launched in 2011. But how we've categorized, if you're looking at launching and want to know the value streams, I think this report by the Union Concerned Scientists kind of categorized 10 areas you can look at investing in, and we do have investments or programs and projects in all 10 of these areas. So just to cherry pick a few, I mean, one thing that first and foremost people look at is public infrastructure, 900 ports and growing. We have a pricing plan of unlimited charging at $417 a month. Also, not all charging events are created equal. I mean, ideally from a utility perspective, we're more about right sizing than faster is always better. I know a lot of emphasis is on how fast, and my colleague from the previous session even talked about, it's not even just how fast the charging infrastructure, it's how fast your car is, and it's the algorithms used when charging a car. There is a curve shape that a lot of people don't understand, but from our perspective, if you want the most low cost overall energy for really everyone, and here in the Texas market, the most done overnight is level 1 charging, just plugging a regular outlet. You really don't need any infrastructure if you're only doing 30 to 40 miles round trip a day. That is by far the cheapest source of energy you can do. So we really try to have our program, as we get faster and faster into the new DC fast and those type of technologies, is high vehicle miles traveled or business applications that require that amount of charge. One thing, if you're a utility and you think storage is important, if you're ignoring the EV market, I think that's not a good idea. If you look at where batteries are going to just naturally be in your territory, they're going to have wheels on it. So that's one of the reasons why we do have a vehicle to grid demonstration as part of our larger Austin Shines project, which is a virtual power plant. It's up and running. We already have some white papers available on it. The findings, we got very nice support from the U.S. Department of Energy grant. And one small sliver, if you look, you really have to, squeeze your eyeballs down there in the top middle where the EV part. It's really about stationary storage and PV solar assets, creating a virtual power plant at residential, commercial, and grid scale, and using a lot of back-end technology to do it. But it does integrate a vehicle to grid component you can see here as part of that overall deployment. Our local Cap Metro is very aggressively moving all electric. They made a comment that they will never buy a fossil fuel vehicle again. We've already started rolling out the first few electric buses with Cap Metro, and then they are building a 200 e-bus fueling, state-of-the-art fueling center. You can see in the kind of the visual in the bottom right below the conversion of that site there. We do have a buyer's guide to help with the point of sale and to collaborate with auto dealerships. You can check that out on ev.austinenergy.com. That shows inventory, incentives, and other programs if you're looking at buying, because one of the biggest barriers, in my opinion, to consumer adoption is really that customer experience at typical dealerships. And so we're doing everything we can, working with our local auto dealerships to understand what that is, and then to create tools for our customers so people show up with, informed, ready to buy, and also that they get a good experience from who meets them at the door, more of a focused effort than just a random who's just kind of drawing your name as you just walk in. We do have residential programs to include a time of use program called EV360. We did launch several years ago and continue to have EVs for everyone. That's our low to moderate income program. That is just a wonderful program. EVs for Schools is a curriculum we developed with local schools. It is part of, it launched as part of our overall umbrella EVs for Everyone, where we initially launched in schools that have high populations of kids from low-income families to really change the next generation thinking, or EVs just aren't, for the rich. They really are for everyone, and we're starting to see the numbers are starting to pin out that way. If you're interested in launching a school curriculum for your local school, talk to us. We have made publicly available and at no cost to the schools, really state-of-the-art curriculum, but it also has other features to include pairing it with charging stations for teachers and staff, or kind of a scientific experiment, working with partners like Z-Prime to create a virtual reality portion for electric vehicles, and just a really cool comprehensive program. And we've already had school districts throughout the US starting to pick that up and run this curriculum. It's going really well here in the Austin market. We do have a T-Rex who is our social media guru in all things EV. Stevie does get around. Stevie's a lot of fun. And that's it on my formal presentation. So at that point, I guess I'll just open up to Q&A.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Karl. It's always exciting to see what you've got going on down in Austin. The opportunity is open. If, as one of the observers, you'd like to jump in and type in your question, please go to your webinar screen and ask a question. And Karl, we do have some questions that have come in at this point, so if you wouldn't mind. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you very much. This is exactly one of the reasons that we're doing this. It's a concept of not having to reinvent the wheel, like literally, like you were just talking about your charging program at schools. And if I heard you correctly, you'd be willing to share that with other organizations if they were looking to talk about the school charging program. Is that right?
Without a doubt. Our contact information, some basic information on the program is at our website, pluginaustin.com, where you can reach out to me via LinkedIn, or my contact information is on this as well, and we'll connect you to the program lead on it and then get you started. But yeah, it's great. It's really good curriculum. Our local school districts have started promoting it with a lot of the remote training going on. So specifically EVs for Schools is remote learning ready as well. And so they've already rolled out ASC as part of this sustainability, environmental and climate change curriculum at the local schools. To date, the last metric I saw, about 6,000 kids have gotten the training. 400 or so teachers have gone through it, and it's being very well received. It's very nice stuff.
It's where the future is. Well done. One question we had, can you please go back to the contact info slide, Karl, so people can see how to contact you? But just a reminder for everybody, everybody will be getting full recording and copies of all these presentations. So, but in the meantime, Karl is putting his contact information back up on the screen, so you can take note of that. Thank you, Karl. Next question has come in, Karl. Can you speak more about the importance of dealer relations?
So without a doubt, and to my earlier comment is, I do think the #1 barrier to EV adoption has been the customer experience, or lack thereof, of going to a dealership. If you go into a typical Texas dealership and there's a row of pickup trucks and you walk in, want to buy an EV, and you just walk in, cold call in, what kind of experience do you think you're going to have? We also, by talking to the dealerships, we found out a few kind of key metrics. On average, to sell a gas car, it takes about 50 minutes. To sell an EV, it takes about 2 hours and 50 minutes. Also,
say that again. That's a write down.
To sell a gas car in Texas, it takes about, when you walk in and when the deal's closed, about 45-50 minutes, because by then you're just talking about color and trim. To sell an EV to a typical dealership. Now I'm kind of removing, I mean, there are some real shining stars there and great experiences in Tesla, but I'm just saying in general. Because you're talking about fueling, you're talking about new technology, you're talking about driving habits, and a lot of people, there's a lot more education to happen. It takes over 2 hours, 45 minutes, 2 hours and 50 minutes to sell that EV. And there's not even like a better close rate on that as well. Also, for whatever reason, nationally, the incentives when there's a study done are significantly less for selling an EV than a gas car. So you as a salesperson are asked to do something that takes longer and get paid less. So obviously there's just natural reasons why dealerships really aren't without some outreach program and training incentives. So when we realized that was a barrier, we've done a few things. So one is to make the fueling a little more simple is car dealerships can buy unlimited public charging, and really this is available to our consumers as well, $50 a year, they prepay it. Some people ask, well, how much does it cost? Well, if you want to charge in the 900 plus charging ports, we've already paid for it, 50 bucks a year. That's not a bad price point. We partnered with Bloomberg and got a Bloomberg grant to kind of help with the overall strategy. And we've also implemented the buyer's guide because one, we want to reduce that time it takes. So if someone's already self-informed, we can take that 2 hours and 45 minutes and maybe get it down to that 45 minutes or pretty close to it. We also have certified salespeople, or a lot of times the internet sales manager, they know all about it. So you're not having people giving misinformation. Oh, the range is this, or not knowing the incentive. So we have more trained people. So they have a kind of a go-to person to sell that EV that's kind of informed on it. The buyer's guide is powered by ZappyRide. That's one of our partners. They're doing a great job. We also partnered with ChargeWay. We have kiosks in several of our pilot dealerships. So people, as well as the staff, when they have some off time, there's these big kiosks and it tells them all about the fueling and fueling infrastructure. We try to simplify fueling. We've gone to a simple number and color system with this ChargeWay and how we categorize it. And we put that very cool kiosk in the dealership. So I think there's just a lot you can do to improve the experience. And I must say, when we reached out to our dealers and had a kickoff meeting, we had probably over 70% of local dealers represented at one kickoff meeting. I mean, granted, we had barbecue with the mayor when we kicked it off, so that's kind of another thing. You feed the people to come in, but the dealers are ready now. Even unlike maybe a few years ago, they are ready. They're wanting to participate. They're competing with each other, become some of the pilot, kiosk participants. Very enthusiastic. A lot of them get it. They hear from their customers. And so we just really want to support their business model and make them as successful as Tesla, frankly, and other people are just hitting out the park.
Great, thank you. We've got a number of questions that have come in. Karl, could you please expand on the EV for schools? Is the charging for free or is there a fee?
So EVs for schools, there's a few components. So there's the curriculum that was done with our partnership with EcoRise, which is a not-for-profit, excellent, very professional who helped develop the program. There are charging stations at schools. So the charging stations for teachers and staff fall under our typical rate. So for $4.17 a month, you can have unlimited charging at your school, which is basically a workplace park charging, or 900 plus charging ports around town. So you just enroll in that program, that $4.17 a month. You also take that if you have charging stations at your school, and we just are installing a DC fast charging hub next to an Austin school district. You can also connect, you get the data as the school if you want to run STEM-based curriculum as part of EVs for schools and test certain hypotheses around charging behavior and patterns.
Great, thank you very much. Next one up. In John Shipman's remarks from New York City, he noted the importance of coordinating charging infrastructure of medium and heavy duty electric vehicles with adjoining utilities. What are the Texas utilities doing in this regard?
Well, I can tell you what we're doing. A lot of it is still pretty early adoption. So I mentioned about the Cap Metro fleet. That's pretty substantial charging needs. And so what we're doing with them is helping them design a depot that will support 200 electric bus fleet. To put in perspective, their entire fleet right now is about 330 traditional buses. So that's more than half of their fleet could be accommodated by this one fueling depot. We're also working on an electrification tariff that Cap Metro and others in that business model could have one more choice to see what makes sense from their electric service capability. We have also opened up charging to be very clear. So we're a city-owned utility. We have been since 1895. The business model works great for Austin. But there was a little shade of gray is, can we allow competition for EV charging? And so we wanted to be very clear as we changed, we requested a change and City Council unanimously agreed to say Austin is open for business. So we got rid of that perceived barrier or that shade of gray, saying in regards to EV charging, it's a competitive market and a landscape. So if you want to bring in DC fast, you can just be a regular commercial account like everyone else and whatever your business model is. And once this tariff is done, you might have one more choice since you're providing electricity to basically batteries with wheels. There might be one way you can kind of help your business model work here in Austin Energy.
Thank you very much. Next one, vehicle to grid. Hold on just a sec, lost it here. Vehicle to grid will be big in the future. We know energy can be delivered to a vehicle via wireless charging. My question is, are you aware that that the process can work in reverse, where energy can be transferred wirelessly from vehicle to the grid?
Yeah, so that's interesting. You know, right now I look at that as just two different things. We are in a discovery phase of inductive or wireless charging for our own team's personal fleet vehicle to have a pad that the company is named Hevo that's providing this pretty state-of-the-art technology in inductive charging. So you can just remove the physical connect and deconnect when you just park in your spot. It's there. But the future of inductive charging looks very promising, faster and faster charging, at some point potentially even electrifying roads. So as you're driving on the road, you're getting charged. You're even seeing buses in some places where they stop, pick up passengers, have inductive charging. Vehicle grid, right now, if you saw that picture that we have a 2019 Nissan Leaf with a 10 kW bidirectional flow as part of the overall Shine solution. So it's being aggregated like a residential system, because we have residential, commercial, and grid with the Shine solution. So that's how we're aggregating it right now. So as of today, it's hard to pencil out the math, but technically it's very feasible. It's very responsive, but I'm still waiting for really more commercial, residential, consumer viability of that two-way flow. When we deployed this a couple of years ago now, the one we had, although it was rated for residential, it was more commercial grade, just the size, the decibel levels were kind of borderline, makes a little whine noise when it goes up, those kind of things. And then the cost was almost as expensive at the Leaf. Now I'm already seeing that change rapidly. And so it's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when that pins out. One of the issues here in Texas, our electricity comparatively to some other markets is pretty cheap. I know Canada has very inexpensive electricity, generally speaking, as well. We're about half the price of California. California is about half the price of Hawaii. So I think from a business market perspective, you'll see some markets based on the value of what it is could embrace it quicker. But we wanted it part of our solution, and we are releasing several reports. And on my information, I also have our Shines webpage that has all the information related to include the vehicle to grid information if you're interested in that.
Thank you. Next one. How do you address dealerships losing the maintenance revenue stream for ICE vehicles?
Yeah, so that's a very popular notion of why EVs don't sell. But talking to car salespeople, sales managers, that's really not how it works at the ground floor. It's really about how you incentivize that salesperson. There isn't really a coordination. Like one of the top EV sales people in the state of Texas named Buzz, he's self-proclaimed the top EV. He might be it. He's up in the Fort Worth area. And he's like, we're just not that sophisticated. If you fix the sell stuff, that's how it's going to work. That's their business unit. It's more siloed than you think. It isn't like they're telling us. So we really wanted to focus on that. So we really listened to people on the ground doing it and what they need to improve that experience, include educational materials, whatnot, buyer's guide, all this stuff you're kind of seeing me doing in that portfolio. At some point that will need to be addressed, and it's evolving business because auto dealerships make a lot of money on the service centers. But so far I haven't just talking to the actual dealerships, being in the ground, having the managers come in for lunch and here's what it is. That's not what we're hearing. They want to sell units and want to get them out the door as quickly as possible. That's what the salespeople are doing.
Great, thank you. Next, does Austin Energy plan to expand EV360 beyond a pilot, or are there other alternatives in consideration?
Yes, we're definitely considering it now. So, and once, we try to be very transparent with what we're doing and where we're at. Our program lead for EV360 did publish a white paper on the EVC program. So it goes into a very deep dive. So if you want about 30 pages of light reading on what we've learned to date, that is available at pluginAustin.com. But what we're finding is so how the program works, it's $30 a month. And for that $30 a month, you get unlimited charging at home as long as you're not charging during a few hours of peak Monday through Friday during summer months. Then you get hammered. So it really shapes it. Well, I don't know,
is that a technical term?
Feel free to talk. Well, I mean, your rate goes from 0.00 kilowatt hour to 41 cents a kilowatt hour if you charge during peak. So I would say probably appropriate. And what we found in our pilot is it works 100% of the time with 99% of the population. We have one guy that just doesn't care, and he'll just do that rate. Yeah. But that's not a bad load shift. Me looking at what you're trying to do, and all that is in all that details in the report for people who want to nerd out on the data. But I see it's a very strong possibility. We will roll it out. We've learned a lot in this pilot where you need to tweak it. And it also not includes the home charging. It also includes free enrollment and unlimited charging 24/7, 365 in those 900 charging ports. So if you have a workplace or if you just want in the glove box for retail, that's included with the $30 a month. So that's a it's convenience at home. It's the flat pricing people like. We do accept a waiting list for people who are interested in it. The waiting list last time I checked is around 600 people. So we know there is demand in there for it. But it is a process, and we're just kind of finalizing some of the data right now to see if we want to, how we want to roll it out. But there are already some tweaks that I know we want to do, and so we need to kind of put those together and design the program. But I think it's highly likely we will expand it beyond the pilot, certainly.
Thank you. John Shipman spoke of from New York City. John spoke of demand charge relief. What is Austin Energy's approach to demand charges?
Yeah, I hear the demand charge thing a lot, generally around providers of DC fast hubs that are coming to your market. Like, oh, there's such a big percentage of my bill can be demand charged, especially in kind of California markets. So the number one thing you can do as a provider, if you want to reduce the percentage of your bill as demand charge, is you drive up usage. So I've known hubs operate in California, they went to 60% of the bill was demand charge, down to 20% almost overnight, because GM may even brought some bolts, just 10 to 15 bolts in that area was enough to kind of put it. So the first thing to do is look at your business model. And so when we cite our own DC fast, I almost feel sorry for people who are putting DC fast in the middle of nowhere in the highway linking up two towns, because you only have one business model. So your usage will be a little low compared to the volume you need. So when we cite our location, we look for 5 to 6 business miles. Sure, corridor traffic is great. We also want to electrify taxis and transportation network companies and gig economy drivers, Uber, Lyft, Favor, et cetera. Get them going as well. We want to support multifamily charging, people who might not be part of our multifamily charging program where they don't have a workplace with their DC fast. So high VMT are people who have to have it. So when you have 5 or 6 business models, all kind of crushing on that usage, then your demand charge is really kind of minimal. And our demand charges are, from an industry standard, pretty low. Here, at least with Austin Energy, when I ran some numbers versus California utilities. So if you open up in Austin, normally people never want to compete on price. But when it comes to electricity, if you're moving from California to Austin, I'm happy to compete on price to include demand charges. Other more aspirational things is energy storage combined with demand charge can be helpful. We just rolled out the ChargePoint CPE 250s, which uses a levelizing technology. So even though you might have a lot of capacity, if they're not all full, but if they are all full, you still don't need. So that's a way to use the technology to levelize your demand charge in some ways, but still get the benefits if you're not fully corralled, if you will. So there's a lot of ways to kind of work around it. And I think still have successful business models.
Thank you. Next one. Care to comment on Tesla's Hutto plant, effect of Austin Energy and/or ERCOT?
Well, I love the idea. First, I called it Hutto. There is a lot of gaming of where it is. So if our viewer knows Hutto, Texas, I'd like to hear it. I've heard Georgetown, I've heard Austin, I've heard Round Rock, I've had Buda. Hutto, I kind of recall Hutto fondly. I went to a high school called Lago Vista, and we used to play. We were like both both of our classes were size like 26. Hutto was the same size, and we played basketball all the time because we're just these small little schools. So Hutto is a little near and dear to my heart, just based on some background there. We would love it. I mean, I love the idea of hopping in an Uber and picking up my Cyber truck or Tesla Y off the factory floor. That sounds great. What I think that it's most exciting when I talked about the growth, there's a culture in Texas on trucks and SUVs. And when we look at the consumer truck market, that's a US thing. You know, unlike sedans, you got to know what's going on in China and what's going on in Norway and whatnot. Trucks is really a US thing. And Texans like to buy Texans truck. And I think Toyota was very smart. That's why they have a big Toyota truck plant in Texas, so built in Texas. I think if you want to accelerate your Cyber truck, you bring it made and built in Texas, make it Texas tough. You're capturing a very strong market, arguably one of the strongest markets around, the Texas truck market. So I think it could also be very clever in shifting the cultural view of electric vehicle trucks. And I think electric vehicle truck is what's really going to break through a lot of what's going on right now. Last national figures I looked at is 67% of new vehicles sold were trucks and SUVs. So in the EV market, traditionally, we've been competing on the 33% slice of the pie. So that's why when I look at projections, rather than these smooth curves, I want to pinpoint in when's the release of that very interesting truck, when's the Ford truck going to be electric, when's the Rivian truck and SUV coming to market, and one's the Cyber truck. So those would be my top three to look at as when we'll see that stepping up, if you will, of demand. As far as it being customer, I mean, if it's an Austin Energy Service territory, we'll treat them like, you know, we'll keep making the kilowatt hours to do what, you know, we have a very robust network. It'd just be another industrial account. You know, we have residential, commercial, and industrial accounts. Each one of those make about a third of our load. So this would just be another customer like anyone else, frankly. We would love to have them. Come on in. We'll keep not a problem.
That's great. Thank you. Next question is, Karl, you've been leading and growing a utility EV program since 2011. What key lessons have you learned along the way?
Well, I think a few things I've learned is, you know, the very first content slide I showed was a picture of my team. If you don't hire good folks, you're not going to get anywhere. And then also the strength of my team is their diversity of their backgrounds. And maybe that's just the nature, because we're also the emerging tech team as well. So electric, so I talked about Shines, energy storage and whatnot. We have a lot of folks working on that on the emerging tech side. But what I find is I have access to it. There's a very hive mind in utilities. You want to hire other people like you that know electrical engineering or have a background in utility space. I don't do that at all. When we launched our low income program and EVs for schools, EVs for everyone, I didn't hire them from the utility. When they walked in the door the very first day, that was utility. The previous 12 years of experience was working in the largest nonprofit in Austin, Meals on Wheels, literally delivering food to the people we're wanting to service. So I want to understand the perspective of the demographic we're trying to serve first and foremost. Same thing with multifamily. When launched our multifamily, I hired a guy with 20 years of property management and hotel management experience. So when we really wanted to ramp up the number of new or existing older multifamily properties to provide it as amenity, he knew them, he knew the amenity business, he knew their business model. So I'd say is, if you're looking around your team, they all seem to have the same background as you, or all have the same background period, you're doing it wrong. Two is, if I were to just have a small budget up front, it would be on marketing and outreach. Lead with, people look at utilities as being a leader in this space, and at least just having your name out there and the old adage as policy and other new products being developed, you know, you're either at the table or on the table. I think that's true. So at least just stating a leadership position and marketing that is a great way to kind of start and being part of those conversations, so you're not left, you know, outside of the table. And I guess is three, you know, to try something. You know, we try a lot of things, and our culture and governance allows it. Not everything you're going to hit out of the park, but if you try enough things, you'll start getting a pretty good, you know, market on that. and then hit on the park. And lastly, I'd say you don't have to fund everything yourself. So since I started in 2011, we've won 13 grants. We've applied for 14, just to give you a sense of the batting average. So those included Department of Energy grants, State of Texas grants, philanthropic grants. There's a ton of different funding out there today and into the future. I mean, if you're looking at rolling out infrastructure and doesn't know what your state Volkswagen settlement funds is doing, well, you're kind of missing the boat there. That's a pretty, nationalized grant. There's a lot of DOE grants. We've done Department of Transportation. So look for partners and collaboration. You're not going to be able to do it yourself, and nothing brings people closer or faster together than you're going after a grant. And frankly, I don't do the grant for the funds. I do the grant for the really to ramp up the collaboration. And then when you accept a grant as an entity, as a utility and department of the city of Austin, we agree to do something with a certain amount of time. So it really gets your project quickly prioritized by accepting this money. You've not only agreed to do something, you've agreed to do it within generally an aggressive timeline. So that just gets the typical culture or the priorities more working in your favor.
Wow, that's a lot of gold right there. Thank you very much. Next question is, what are some of your key takeaways from your low to moderate income transportation electrification program?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, and something I had to learn from Amy, who I hired, who basically spent a career in low to moderate incomes. I mentioned the Meals on Wheels, or prior to that, VH1, Save the Music, etc. If you want to do a program or do infrastructure, you have to lead with talking to them first. Even well-intentioned, oh, it's going to be so low price and they're going to like it, and it's going to check out the boxes. But as a community, if they just see this stuff pop up, they're not going to think it's for them unless it was their idea. So first and foremost, if you're doing something around a low-income community, you need to get their buy-in and let them kind of lead the direction, and you're there as resources to provide for them. One of the reasons why in a lot of our outreach, we bring electric bikes and we have rebate programs or something like that is in a lot of our lower income communities, they look at bike lanes as the first form of gentrification. That's not for us. So we're trying to change that dynamic and they say, oh, well, I have this lane, it goes straight to the grocery store. Maybe I don't need a car. And this, you start getting those light bulb moments, but it's really about outreach and marketing, and really letting them lead the discussion, and you're in there. So that would probably be the number one thing I've learned. Really understand your stakeholders, who you hire. Don't hire a professional engineer, 20-year passionate, dedicated utility person to lead your low-income program. Go out into the community, find someone who already has a network, already has the relationships, already has the gravitas of working within those communities and showing a commitment to dedication, and then convince them to then join your team, and then you can help them with the electrical stuff. So it's very important, I'd say, how you hire your program leads for that. And that's another example of a grant and partnerships. We launched that program over 3 years now with a grant from the 11th Hour Project. So that's the Google Schmidt Family Foundation who did the seed funding so we could hire a full-time person to do it. Since then, those funds have waned off, but we got so used to the success of it. And so now it's just part of my annual operational budget. I couldn't see us doing it without it. But that's another example. If you're doing something kind of a little bit different, there's a lot of partnerships if you want to get that seed funding going.
Great, thank you. Karl, many people can't charge at home. How do you support folks living in multi-family properties?
Yeah, so Austin is about 50% multifamily. I just moved out of condo living for 13 years. There's a lot of issues there. There's policy issues. There is, one thing is I just want to provide charging at HOAs. So that's owner-owned condominiums. And even being the HOA president for 6 years and in charge of the EV team at the same time, man, it was really hard because you can't get more political than dealing with HOAs and how I don't want to spend a penny on something that helps that person and that kind of stuff. So how we've solved it to date is, so when I hear multifamily, that's a very broad brush. So let's talk first about apartments and renters and property management, because they're different than HOAs and condos. So property management, they compete on amenities. And so one thing we did early on is we wanted to get 20 new property, not new, we're already getting the new construction. What I mean new is they might be 20, 30 years, be more in East Austin, low to moderate income areas, but how can they provide it as amenity? What we find, it's a domino effect. Once a couple start doing it, we literally got calls to the property across the street. They saw the infrastructure going in and a sign, EV ready, plug in here, and they called on the program. So, but you need to get that going, because what apartment property management do, they compete on amenities. And we did some focus groups, and we saw EV charging is right around the top 3 or top 4 new amenity moving forward. So it's on people's radar and they want to compete in it. They just need to start seeing other people doing it. Also, level 1 is very attractive. You don't need all this. The problem, one-time property management, when you first do it, they want the level 2 and they want it next to the clubhouse and when you come in as a show off. But you really want it more. I'm more interested in, we're looking at some level 1 pilots where we just kind of put it in the back and not the big seat. So it's just people can just have that level 1 charge in. DC fast is also good for multifamily as well, for if they have absolutely no way to do it at home. And so part of our siting criteria is looking at multifamily corridors. But in Austin, that's just, it's almost everywhere. But there's more prevalent areas than other. Workplace charging is very, so we have 900 level 2 charging ports that we manage today in Austin. By far, our most popular and consistent are workplace charging, and that really supports people driving in to include multifamily. We have and a lot of marketing and outreach. We're trying to get EV charging like listed in the different buyers guide. We had some successes. Are you supportive of EV ready or not? We advertise EV ready community so people can come in, and I want a list of the 30 or 40 properties that already have it, and we promote that. And I'll just end on kind of one last thing is kind of the new wave. So we capture a lot of the new properties through our green building program, and then now through LEED program as just a way, as just whether it's EV infrastructure or EV ready. And we did post on pluginaustin.com a case study on a property called 4th and West. So 4th and West, it was a luxury condo, is downtown, is being built. They wanted to be very aggressive on EV readiness in their parking garage. They went 40% to include the ground transformers, the wiring to support EV charging. They got such a positive feedback where people were buying these condos. I'm so glad you have this as amenity. I want to charge my car here. They went from 40% to 100% market driven, just based on what great customer demand they were getting in these condos. So that gets more into condos and HOAs. And then we made some changes in city code, as well as create a legal template between an HOA and the consumer that allows them to build infrastructure and it not be resellable electricity. So we created a legal document to help. So that is something finally we were able to figure out. It took me a while to do that one, but there's a lot of ways you can do it. And I'm seeing it more and more prevalent.
Great, Karl. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left with your time, and just might you make a comment in terms of what are the top things that utilities have to get right as they implement their EV strategy?
Top things is your team. You got to have a good team and how you hire the team. 2 is your ability to collaborate and play nice with others. As an EV team, you're going to have new stakeholders that the utility typically doesn't have outside of just being another customer of an electric utility bill, like auto dealerships. That's typically not like but if you're a utility, you want to know it. So you want to have reach out to new stakeholders, collaborative, who you hire. Be good with the marketing and outreach. When we first looked at, launching our program, our outreach program, our 1.0 marketing campaign, we saw the traditional utility stuff come to us, and I said no to all of it. It just looked like a coupon and whatnot. Be creative, be fun, look at other kind of leaders overall and how they do marketing and outreach to just kind of make you, I think, a lot more effective than relying on traditional utility marketing efforts. That's typically not our strength as utilities, but you can make it your strength in the EV space. And then lastly is rates and tariffs. And sometimes you have to be a little more creative. We look at the overall value of EV charging, as we roll out pilots and whatnot. It's more than just, an electric service, because there's different load profiles. There's someone buying an EV and they're only charging really 15% on public infrastructure, but you're getting a lot of revenue in the residential. And how can you capture that from a tariff perspective?
Great. Last one, just would you have any things to avoid? What are the top things to avoid?
Things to avoid. I would say play to your strengths. Don't think you're going to be all of a sudden, like a Google or an Amazon, is utility have strengths, traditional engineering, you have great community contact, you got a lot of leadership, and when you look at trustworthiness, utilities are very high up there. So I would say play to your strengths. Don't be something you're not be, and then where you need to fill in the gaps, you collaborate with partners.
Well, with that, thank you very much. Well said, Karl. Again, the whole purpose of this EVCx forum is to share best practices, so we're not all reinventing the wheel, so to speak. And you have gone through on a lot of the bleeding edge, no doubt, and learned a lot of things. And we thank you so much for sharing your experience and learning, as John did and as Franz has done. There's some great leadership that's happening in New York and in Quebec and in Austin, and we just thank you for taking that time with us. So with that, we'll let you just sign off your screen. I've just got a couple of concluding remarks here, so thanks again, Karl. So with that, we've come to the end of our day one activities. So as we just said, we heard from John Shipman from Con Ed and what's going up in the New York City and surrounding area. Franz Leprand from Hydro-Quebec and some of the challenges and opportunities and success there, and then also with Karl just now from Austin Energy. So just in terms of day one next steps. So as a registrant of day one, you will be receiving a full recording of all the presentations and all the talk that's gone on, and you will also be receiving a survey. Some of the items in the survey will include things like, what future topics would you like to hear about with the EVCx forum? Who are the suggested presenters? Could it be you and your utility? What format do you prefer? Face-to-face, virtual, combination? What about the cadence that you'd like to have these meetings from a timing perspective? And you'll also be entered in, if you put in your survey, you'll be entered into a draw for prizes. We're making the prize recipients, we're allowing them to choose one of the published books from CS Week, and I know there's a lot of great value there. So be on the lookout for that. We're asking that the surveys be returned back to us no later than this Friday, May the 22nd. So tomorrow we'll be starting again on day two at the same time. So, and just a reminder, you do need to sign on with a separate registration address for day two. We'll be starting at 1 o'clock Eastern, and again going to about this time tomorrow afternoon. With that, I just wanted to remind you what we'll be covering tomorrow. Again, we'll be continuing on with the utility view that we've spoken about. We've heard from the speakers today. Tomorrow we'll be kicking it off with our last utility view speaker, and that's James Cater, who will be telling us what's going on up at Eversource in the Boston, Massachusetts, New England States area, which will be great. And then really pleased, you won't want to miss this, we've got our keynote speaker who will be talking to us about the worldview. Peter Fox Penner is author, director of Boston University's Institute for Sustainable Energy. He's the Chief Strategy Officer, Energy Impact Partners and Advisors for the Brattle Group. And really pleased that Peter will be interviewed in a kind of a fireside chat format using this technology by Penny McLean Connor. Penny is very well known across the industry. She's Chief Customer Officer and Senior Vice President with Eversource. And she's also the board chair of CS Week. So we really look forward to that. And then finally, we're going to spin it up completely. And we're going to get a completely different view from a utility perspective. We're going to go outside, look in. And that's the infrastructure experience view. And we're really thrilled to have Dan O'Shea from ABB, our sponsor company, who's going to be speaking to us. So with that, thanks to our speakers and to you, our attendees. I would like to again recognize and thank our EV Forum sponsor, ABB. Thank you, ABB. This event would not have happened without your support. To all, please be on the lookout for your copy of day one proceedings in your email. Be sure to fill out the survey by this Friday, May the 22nd. And we'll be using this information to help plan future EVCx forum sessions. So I look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. So we'll say bye for now.